I've just spoken with one of the leaders of the Bakir tribe, the biggest tribe in northern parts of Yemen, and he said that he doesn't know any decision by his own tribe to join the anti-government movement. It could be individuals or branches of the tribe joining the anti-government movement, but as far as the tribe is concerned, there hasn't been officially no decision made.
All right, Hashim Al-Bara in Sana'a, thank you. Now, Iraq's largest oil refinery has come under attack by a team of gunmen. At least 2 workers have been killed. The plant is part of the Beji complex, around 250 kilometers north of Baghdad. Reports are that a team of gunmen infiltrated the refinery in the middle of the night and laid bombs in strategic positions. They then fled before detonating the devices. The attack caused extensive damage, meaning the plant is going to be out of action for several weeks. And the impact is expected to be felt most in the domestic market in Iraq. This refinery supplies almost half of the domestic petroleum products like gasoline and heating oil. Jane Araf has more from Baghdad.
This was a serious breach of security at one of Iraq's biggest oil installations. This time, it wasn't one of the pipelines or the oil fields, which is home to foreign investment. It's the biggest refinery in the country, the Beji refinery north of Baghdad. According to officials there, gunmen infiltrated the facility at 4:30 this morning, spraying the place with gunfire after they left as they laid bombs in control rooms. Those bombs set off fires that have caused extensive damage to a large part of the refinery. One engineer was killed by smoke inhalation, another technician killed by gunfire as the gunmen went out shooting. He says they're assessing not only the damage to the refinery, but exactly how the security breach could have happened. The facility is protected by a unit attached to the Ministry of the Interior. He says they are trying to increase confidence among staff who are afraid to come back to work. But in the short term, it will lead to a shortage of gasoline, a shortage of kerosene, and certainly have an impact on the confidence of Iraqis that their government can keep these installations safe.
Now, in New Zealand, 145 people are now confirmed dead, and more than 200 are still missing after Tuesday's earthquake. Andrew Thomas reports.
What the earthquake didn't pull down, machines now razed to the ground. This was Brent Smith's bed and breakfast.
There's the saying, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, I haven't stopped shaking since they started, and it's just history, you know, it's history gone.
The house was 155 years old. It was gone in an hour and a half. This is just one of many hundreds of buildings that will have to be demolished over the next weeks and months. In the city centre, 1 in 3 buildings assessed so far has been found to be structurally unsound. The precariousness of so many buildings makes the work of the rescue and body recovery teams that much harder, as aftershocks continue to bring masonry down. In the suburbs, different problems. One, silt. When the quake hit in a process called liquefaction, muddy water bubbled up through the ground. This is what it's left behind. Many suburbs still have no power nor water, so volunteers 30 kilometres from Christchurch have started a production line of hot food. A local helicopter company then flies in to pick it up.
As of yesterday, we flew in 12,000 kgs of hot food, hot meals into some of the poorest and hardest hit suburbs of Christchurch.
This is where the meals end up. When the residents of Burwood hear the rotor blades, they flock.
We had grilled cheese sandwiches on the barbecue the first night, so this is much better.
Because you can't store food with no refrigeration, it's, this is a good proper meal.
Streets can be cleaned, power will return, but buildings and people in Christchurch are gone forever. The city will never be what it was before. Andrew Thomas, AlJazeera, Christchurch.
Now, counting has begun after the elections in Ireland, and the opinion polls suggest the main ruling party, the Fianna Fáil, is heading for its worst ever defeat. After 14 years in power, it seems voters are blaming the party for mishandling the economic crisis. Fianna Fáil's led the government through the boom years, but they've ended with a joint EU-IMF bailout of the country. Meanwhile, the opposition, Fine Gael, has said it will try to renegotiate the terms of Ireland's debt. Now, Japan's population is seeing the slowest growth since records began in 1920. The latest figures show just a nominal increase to just over 128 million people. And the trends show that the population is on course to shrink. Harry Fawcett has the story from Takane.
Winters in Takane aren't for the faint of heart. It's -10 Celsius on a Sunday morning, an overnight snowstorm adding to its beauty and its isolation. 84-year-old Sato Morishita is back to check on her house. Most of the year she lives here alone, but for the last 3 winters she's had to find refuge elsewhere.
I used to shovel snow off the roof myself, but now I can't be bothered. People here spend their winter buried under the snow.
What's happening here in Takane is an acute instance of the demographic problem that's confronting the whole of Japan. The population rapidly aging and shrinking, authorities left struggling to find new ways to cope. Locals say this series of hamlets ought to be home to 1,000 people. With an exodus of the young to the cities, the population has halved, and nearly half of those who remain are 65 or older. So a former home for school teachers has been transformed into a temporary winter shelter for the old.
It's very warm here. I can talk to others and have meals together, and I enjoy it. Each day goes by so quickly.
Japan's demographic storm has been gathering for decades. Each person in retirement is supported by only 2.6 in work, the lowest rate among developed countries, and it's falling. Already 70% of the debt-hit government's social security spending goes on those over 65, leading to calls for cuts. Even this modest project has lost its central government funding.
Rather than simply receiving funding from the country or from towns and villages, local people need to build structures where they look after and support each other, as they used to do in the past.
Takane's winter shelter is being touted nationwide as a model for innovative elder care, and it's part of a wider refrain that Japan will have to get used to being older and having less. Put another way, the future might look more like Takane than Tokyo. Harry Fawcett, AlJazeera, Takane, Japan.
This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making the headlines. Libya's former interior minister has told Al Jazeera Tripoli is now the only major city that remains under the control of Muammar Gaddafi. The Libyan leader, however, has made another defiant address, vowing that he will not step down. The US has imposed sanctions on Libya's government, and the UN's Security Council will meet again on Saturday to follow up its draft resolution calling for sanctions. Meanwhile, hundreds of foreign nationals continue to be evacuated from Libya. Some are describing what they have seen in the country as horrifying. Egypt's ruling military council has apologized after military police beat protesters during overnight demonstrations. The council said the violence was the result of unintentional confrontations between the military police and the youth of the revolution. It has ordered the immediate release of everyone arrested on Friday night. Yemen's president is facing growing pressure to resign. Some of the country's major tribes have now announced their support for the anti-government movement. This includes the Hashid tribe, considered the country's most powerful. Its members hold several key government positions. Iraq's largest oil refineries come under attack by a team of gunmen. At least 2 workers were killed, and the plant, part of the Beji complex around 250 kilometers north of Baghdad, has been shut down. A team of gunmen infiltrated the refinery in the middle of the night and fled before detonating explosive devices inside. The attack has caused extensive damage. It's expected to be out of action for several weeks. Israeli warplanes have attacked a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. The Al-Baraj camp was hit in the early hours of Saturday morning. The Israeli army claims the airstrike was in response to rockets being fired into southern Israel. There's been a suicide attack in the northern Faryab province in Afghanistan. 1 person died, 25 others were injured in the attack, which took place at a traditional sporting event. Meanwhile, in the east of the country, in Khost province, 9 civilians in a private van were killed by a roadside bomb. Police say 4 children were among the dead. In Ireland, the exit polls are suggesting the ruling Fianna Fáil party has suffered a huge defeat in the general election. The main opposition party looks on course to lead the next government, but without an overall majority. And police in New Zealand say the death toll from the earthquake is now at 145, with 200 still missing. Those are the headlines. The news continues in half an hour after Inside Story.
After more than a week of unrest, thousands of Libyans are still calling for the end of Muammar Gaddafi's rule. But the man who's led Libya for more than 41 years is clinging to power. What does the current political structure in Libya look like, and what kind of Libya would emerge if Gaddafi falls? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. For the past 41 years, the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has created his own style of rule, the so-called state of the masses, or Jamahiriya. It's a political system that was supposed to create a popular government with power directly vested in the hands of the people. In 1990, Gaddafi was appointed supreme leader by the General People's Congress that he created in 1977. In 1992, Gaddafi fragmented the political structure by dividing Libya into 1,500 mahallat, or communes, each with its own budget and powers. In 2000, he abolished most central government executive functions, devolving responsibility to 26 councils that make up the General People's Congress, maintaining control over all facets of the regime. But the reality is that unlike in Tunisia or Egypt, Libya lacks the strong institutions that could help smooth a transition process. With Gaddafi's regime seemingly on its last legs in Libya, some form of leadership is taking place in the eastern part of the country. Well, joining us now to talk more about this are our three guests in London. Jeremy Keenan, North Africa security analyst and author of books on the Maghreb region, including The Dark Sahara, America's War on Terror in Africa. In Amman, Ahmed Atiga, a Libyan analyst. In Washington, D.C., Ibrahim Sahad, Secretary General for the National Front for the Salvation of Libya. Jeremy Keenan, if I could start with you. The Libyan state has essentially been built around one man, and there's no unifying force or figure to replace him. So is there a risk of a major power vacuum here should Gaddafi eventually fall?
I think there will obviously be a power vacuum. That goes without saying, because in a sense, Gaddafi and his family and his thugs and the institutions immediately close to him, his own Praetorian Guard, were in a sense the power. However, in answer to that question, I have huge faith in the Libyan